quite frankly, as you rightly said, I had some expectations, or we had some expectations, Ghanaians in general. But what the finance minister came with yesterday was basically not what we were expecting. In fact, it was below par. It was not what we were expecting at all. I mean, first and foremost, you would have thought that having the IMF at their back, they will, for the first time, begin to tell us the truth about the true state of Ghana's economy. We didn't get that. They went back to the old stuff of praising themselves of what they've done in the past. You know, it was like it's like a young girl in a village who was so beautiful, abused herself, and then obviously got old. And what he does is just go for her old pictures to basically look at how beautiful she was. That's exactly what the finance minister did yesterday. They were talking about how good they were, but not how they were going to fix the problems that, are confronting us at the moment. Number two, you would have thought that they will use this opportunity to send a signal to the IMF and the financial community, both domestic and international, as to how they are willing to adopt the measures with Bank of Ghana, both physical and monetary measures, to be able to get Ghana back on track, restore stability, and that I mean economic stability and financial stability. Again, we were expecting that they were going to tell us where they are at the moment with the IMF discussion, and then to tell us exactly what they were going to get or ask the IMF for. We didn't also hear that. And then the fifth one is that we were expecting to hear basically why they've come to us, and by us I mean Parliament, that what were they expecting us to do. Initially, we heard they were coming, with a motion, same way as we normally do a media review, where you will bring a supplementary estimate, because obviously you are rendering account of the budget you did in November for 2022, which obviously you are telling us that things have changed significantly, whether external factors or, self-induced problems. But then he came in a form of a statement telling us that they're actually not going to ask us for any money. A country that is at the moment on its knees and calling IMF to come and bail them comes to Parliament to tell us that they don't actually need money, but they're just coming by way of information. It's unbelievable. And where they are going to find money to do all the things they are talking about, it's quite difficult to understand. But it looks as if they are banking their hope on a money that they said did not exist, and that is to do with the windfall in the petroleum. You remember earlier on when people were calling that use the petroleum windfall, because we are an oil-producing nation, to support the consumers on the front end in terms of downstream, petroleum products. And they said, no, we are a net importer of oil, so we don't have any money, to be able to do that. All of a sudden, they have adjusted the oil price in the budget, which they was estimated around $61, $62 to $9.94. Oil has been running around 100, crude price around 100 for the last 6 months. So there has been a windfall from January to date. My question is, where is that money to start with? And secondly, if you look at the volumes that they were talking about, that the volumes will drop slightly, but it is still going to net us about $1 billion. Of course, not all the money probably will be ours, because there are other players within or other stakeholders within the oil production. But we estimate that at least 500 million will accrue to us, $500 million. And that is what they are banking on, to use that money to support all the changes that they are making to the economy.
So let me start from was it to say that you expected that they should have come for some new approvals?
Well, if they are going to IMF for money, then obviously the economy needs money. So instead of using some hard currency that you have, at the moment, we need the biggest challenge for this country, which the government doesn't realize. And I have said time and time again that I've come to realize that this government doesn't actually understand the problem that is confronting us. The dire situation that we are in, they don't actually say it. Because if they do, they will not be scratching the surface. In an economy where you have a balance of payment challenge, in an economy where you have gone to the IMF, and the IMF will not come to your rescue in terms of money until they have gone through, restructuring and all that. That will not happen for the rest of the year. The earliest program you get with the IMF will probably be next year. So how are you going to deal with the balance of payment issue? How are you going to deal with your reserves? How are you going to support your currency so that it stops depreciating and it increases your debt? How are you going to deal with the payment of your external debt? All these things are in hard currency. They are not in cities. Therefore, if your Eurobond of 3 billion a year is not coming in because you've been downgraded, if your 1.5 million and 1.5 billion of syndicated loan for the cocoa production is not coming in as you used to, if your export revenue as a result of the global situation is gone down, then how are you going to replenish your reserves and save your balance of payment? So if you are lucky to become an oil producing nation and you are producing crude for hard currency, one would expect that you use some to support your petroleum product, that is to the consumer price at the pump, and then you use the rest to support your balance of payment while you are waiting for an IMF program. And then whatever else you have, which is where you could come to Parliament and then look at how you tell us how you perform on the e-levy. Tell us how the 30% discretionary cut has given you. Tell us all the savings that you are making in all those cosmetic adjustments that you claim you have done, so that we know your position. And then tell us that if you need an additional money to basically manage the domestic economy, we see where you are going to get the money from. But if you are going to use the money that could have gone into your balance of payment to stabilize this economy, look, our external debt, as of November when the budget was read, was 27 billion US dollars, our external debt. That translates at the time to 163 billion Ghana cedis at an exchange rate of 6. Today, the same debt of 27 billion US dollars at an exchange rate of 8 Ghana cedis to the dollar, the same debt is now 223 billion, which means that within 6 months, without borrowing any money, your debt in local currency has gone up by 60 billion. So our true debt situation is not the 391 that the Bank of Ghana billion that the Bank of Ghana is telling us, but our debt, public debt, is around about 420 billion Ghana cedis. That is the situation that is confronting us. So if you don't address your balance of payment, if you don't address your currency, even without doing anything, your economic situation will get worse because your debt will become larger and larger and larger until it becomes absolutely unsustainable.
And the big question remains then, how do you deal with this situation? And listening to you, I get the impression that you didn't hear anything within the budget that tells you government on its own has a plan as to how to approach this.
None at all. None. They're just scratching the surface of the problem. And now all of a sudden, they think that they can survive with crude prices going up without passing anything to the consumers. And now this is what they're going to live on until hopefully IMF comes to build them. But the IMF program itself, to me, does not look likely. It doesn't look likely that Ghana will get a program at all under the IMF. For the simple reason, the same reason that I thought we were going to end up with the IMF. Now the picture looks very bleak in the sense that the problem we are having at the moment is how to restructure There's no doubt that Ghana's debt is not sustainable, even though IMF, being a diplomatic institution, has told us that they have to do an assessment before they can actually tell us, what our situation is. But without any assessment, you can see that our debt sustainability is a serious problem. So if it's a serious problem, then how are you going to structure that debt? In the past, during Kufuor's time, when we went to IMF, the HIPU program, Ghana has not done any capital market instrument. That is, we have never been to the Eurobond market or the capital market. So our debt were basically bilateral and multilateral. So renegotiating or restructuring those debts were not difficult, because bilateral is one-on-one. If you have some debt with a country, you speak to them and see what you can do with them. If you have a multilateral, that is the World Bank, the African Development Bank, again, you know where they are. You can talk to them, and that's what we've done in the past. Now, during President Milton's time, Milton never did Eurobond. So the Eurobond in existence was the one done by Kufuor. Again, it was easy to, most of our debt were bilateral, multilateral, with just one Eurobond. It was easy to negotiate and restructure that debt. Even that debt was not restructured. It was done under President Mahama. Now, when President Mahama came in and we went to the Eurobond, we went to IMF. We had done 2 Eurobonds for 2 billion. And then when you add the Kufuor's one, that's 2.75 billion. So when we had to restructure, the majority of our debt were multilateral, bilateral, and I'm talking about the external debt. And then 2.75 billion US dollars of Eurobond, which again you could manage. So we did manage to restructure Kufuor's one and paid 500 million out of that, so that we were left. At the time the bond was due to mature, we had only 250 million that we left in the kitchen in a sinking fund for this government to use in paying for that debt. Now the situation now is completely different. This government in the last 5 years has borrowed from the capital market 11 billion, over 11 billion. The total done on the John Mahama and Kufuor from Kufuor up to John Mahama was say over 3 billion. This government in the last 5 years has done 11 billion. So if you put our total capital market debt together, we're talking about 14-15 billion. Now,
$14-15 billion.
Billion dollars.
Okay.
Now, our whole external debt, as I told you earlier, as of November, was 27 billion. So the 27 billion external debt that we have, 15 billion of it is just Eurobond in the capital market. So the rest is what we have as bilateral and multilateral. So the capital market debt is more than what we have. So the negotiation in terms of restructuring your debt has not changed. You will have to restructure your debt with the capital market. And you know what that means? When you go to the capital market, there are people called rating agents who will basically downgrade you. Because once you come and you say you can't pay your debt, you want to restructure, your bonds basically become a junk bond and you will be downgraded. Now, the way to restructure is normally to borrow fresh loans to retire the old ones, which were presumed to be, say, expensive. So you borrow and hopefully you expect to get a better rate and all that to retire a debt which is supposed to be more expensive. Now, when you don't have the credibility, when you have already been downgraded, the money you can borrow in the market, the fresh loans to retire the old ones, will have to be more expensive than the old ones you want to retire. So how on earth would you want to use expensive loans to retire old loans in a way of restructuring? And it is for that reason that we will not get an IMF program. Because IMF does not fund an economy that is not sustainable, that has debt that are not sustainable. That's their principle. So if you can't restructure and your debts are going to remain unsustainable, then you will come out with IMF saying that you don't want money from IMF again, but you are going to go for technical assistance. And I think that is the soft landing that they are hoping to land on. And that will have a serious consequences on Ghana's economy. Look, the worst is yet to come.
And well,
I don't want to be a prophet of doom.
And because of course I like to hear, because we are all thinking about what is the worst scenario that confronts us, because you said that you did not hear the truth about the economy when the finance minister was speaking yesterday. What is the worst scenario we are looking at, which the surface of which he may be scratching but really not going into the details?
Well, basically we will default on our debt, because if we don't have enough foreign exchange to pay for our external debt, and by debt I'm talking about external, because domestic we are able to pretty much manage it. In the last 2 quarters of this year, we've been borrowing from the domestic market about 24 billion, of which we use 20 billion in retiring, maturing debt. So the fresh borrowing for the last quarter is about 45 billion. So in the last 6 months of the year, we have borrowed fresh loans domestically, about 8 billion. Okay. Now for external, we have not been able to do any borrowing there because of our downgrading status, and therefore we'll be worse off for any loans we go for. Now, the issue now is not about borrowing, it's about paying our interest. And at the moment, we will, in the end, default. We had about 1.4 billion interest payment to do this year. Now, after the time the budget was read, that 1.5 billion was 8 billion Ghana cedis. Today, that same 1.4 billion interest payment is 11 billion. So that is what has moved the interest payment from 37, as it was read by the finance minister, to about 41. That difference there is actually in exchange rate losses. And not, so basically, if you don't address the balance of payment, that is why the balance of payment becomes so important. We will default, and in effect, Ghana could lead to bankruptcy and become a Sri Lanka situation. Because what I see is that now our GDP has actually been also been downgraded from 5.8 or something to 3.7. What that means that in nominal terms, we were expecting to have a GDP of about 500 billion. The last year GDP was about 440 billion. We expect the GDP to be around 500 billion. If it's been downgraded, or if we have reduced our expectations to 3.7, then it means we will not get a 500 billion in nominal terms. Our GDP will be around 450 billion. Now, that means that our debt, which is 420, is almost equal to the size of the economy. So when your asset or your liability is getting closer to your asset, you are heading towards bankruptcy. That's the picture at the moment. And don't forget, our reserves has also depleted to the levels that we are in at the moment. So yes, worst case scenario, default on our loans, bankruptcy, no reserves to support import cover, and it becomes more or less a hopeless situation.
That's a worrying scenario to think about.
Extremely worried.
And you say we are getting closer every day.
We should wake up seriously. Otherwise, these guys will run us into a situation where, at the end of the day, what are you going to do to them? When they run down the economy and all that, you can put them in prison or whatever you can do. But then the suffering will be on the people of Ghana.
And the major question is, what can be done to rescue the situation? You have growing demands in Parliament. Some of your colleagues have been demanding that the finance minister should be removed, among others. They are not budging on all those. And I also understand in Parliament, the minority has also started gathering signatures to start a vote of censure against him, which perhaps can only succeed if if you get the other side backing you. So what can be done in this situation?
Well, the situation now is quite a bad one. The finance minister is a beleaguered finance minister. He has failed the economy, and his position is simply untenable. The finance minister cannot be the one to lead us in an IMF program, a program and an institution he doesn't believe in. Why would you want your best negotiator to be somebody who doesn't believe in the people he's going to negotiate with? How is he going to get a good deal? He doesn't trust the IMF, and I think the feeling is mutual. The IMF is also aware that he doesn't believe in, IMF. So they too, they don't trust him. So how are you going to have a good start in such a negotiation? It is for that reason that I think if the finance minister can do us a favor and just basically go away.
Let me conclude with one question. Yesterday, your colleague, Kaisala Toforsen, who is the spokesperson on finance, raised an issue. The issue was with the Bank of Ghana printing new money and not alerting Parliament. What is the problem there?
Well, the problem there is that in the Bank of Ghana Act, the Bank of Ghana cannot finance the government, that is the Ministry of Finance, more than 5% of the country's revenue, total revenue. That is the law. Okay? When we went to the IMF program, even the IMF are against that. IMF wants zero financing from central bank because they believe that central bank financing leads to an abuse. Because central bank financing is basically printing money. We are not talking about reserves here. We are talking about cedis. And only the Republic of Ghana, but through the Bank of Ghana, print cedis. So anytime you go to ask for the Bank of Ghana for money they don't have, they will have to print it for you. Printing money means inflation. That is why we have that law that prevents the Bank of Ghana from financing, basically by printing more than 5% of revenue to support government. Now, our revenue last year was around 90 billion. This year we were expecting about 100 billion. So even if you take it out, our revenue is 100 billion. Bank of Ghana could not have financed the government by 5 billion Ghana cedis. Now, in the budget, in the funding mix, if you go to the section about the funding mix, how the deficit is funded, there is 22 billion which has been made available to the government of Ghana by the central bank. So that's a breach of the law. And secondly, we're not doing ourselves any favor. It is not surprising that inflation is skyrocketing, and they are blaming it on Russia and Ukraine. But these things, printing money causes inflation, and the more you print it, the more inflation you get. That's what the problem is.
If it is an illegality, what can be done? Because we even have a fiscal liability law or something that is supposed to subject the finance minister to criminal proceedings if it goes about a certain level of the deficit. It's still sitting there. We've gone above it.
That is the corporate, and that is the what is it called? The Fiscal Responsibility Act and other, in the Financial Management, Act. But then these things are functions. So obviously we have to look at the law and look at the sanctions that are there to deter people from doing that. Because it is not, up to this current governor. But it is something we have to make sure that going forward, we don't continue doing this. Because then we are basically, when people are working hard to restore the economy, there are others who are behind the scenes printing money, as if there's no tomorrow. You are borrowing and you are printing money all at the same time. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. And it is not surprising that things are the way they are at the moment. I am really worried, extremely worried. If you don't see what is going on, or if you don't understand the numbers, you probably sleep easily. But when you do understand what is going on, it is really frightening for Ghanaians where we end up. If you look at the Sri Lanka situation, and you look at what is happening in the country at the moment, in Sri Lanka, you don't wish that on your worst enemy. And if care is not taken, that is where we're going to end up descending. Because at the moment, we are not getting enough money to bring in petroleum products into the country. And the more our reserves dwindle, the less we'll be in a position to support the BDCs in bringing fuel into the country. These things are at no cost to government, because government just gives the money as a loan and these guys are supposed to pay. But they might not have the money in the first place to give them to bring the oil in. So, in addition to all the hardships that this country is facing, you're also going to be facing challenges with not only prices of fuel, but the scarcity of it.
Honorable, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
My pleasure.
Honorable George Kweku Ricketts Hagan is Member of Parliament for Cape Coast South. We'll take a break. When we'll come back, we'll return to the figures on the free SHS. We'll take it to the UK. We have a few other conversations on this media.